And I guess that's the extent of what I wanted to say. Just definite support for them moving back in there. Let's get going with it. Because right now it's kind of empty, quiet, and dead.
Thank you.
There are no other hands raised.
All right, we will close the public hearing, and I will read the proposed motion, which is extremely long, so please bear with me. The Ann Arbor City Planning Commission, after hearing all interested persons and reviewing all relevant information, including an accompanying site plan, finds the petition substantially meets the standards in Chapter 55 Unified Development Code, Section 5.29.5 Special Exceptions, and Section 5.16.3.g.4 Marijuana Facilities, and therefore approves the modification to the 700 Tappan Street Special Exception Use for a Marijuana Provisioning Center. This approval is based on the following findings. 1, the proposed use will be consistent with the PUD, Casa Dominic's Planned Unit Development District, which provides for grocery, prepared food, and beverage sales and retail, as interpreted by the Zoning Board of Appeals, case ZBA 11-022, January 25th, 2012. 2, the PUD supplemental regulations were revised in December 2021 to prohibit parking and impervious surface between the structure at 700 Tappan and the public sidewalk along Monroe. Parking in this area was the main issue of concern for the Planning Commission at the time of the original approval. 3, the proposed use will not adversely impact traffic, pedestrians, bicyclists, circulation, or road intersections based on the location. Tappan Street and Monroe Street provide access to the site, and the proposed use is consistent with other surrounding uses' traffic impact. 4, through documentation submitted by the petitioner regarding waste disposal, inventory tracking, security, and other methods of operation of the facility, the provisioning center will be operated in a manner that will not have an adverse impact on the neighboring properties or area and will not have a detrimental impact on natural features. This modified special exception use approval is based on the following conditions. 1, the petitioner obtaining and maintaining both a state of Michigan medical marijuana license and a city of Ann Arbor medical marijuana permit, and providing documentation to planning services within 3 years of the City Planning Commission approval date of this petition. And 2, the petitioner operating a medical marijuana business at this address within 3 years of the City Planning Commission approval date of this petition. And that the Ann Arbor Planning Commission approves the attached site plan, which demonstrates compliance with the applicable special exception use standards, as no physical development of the property is proposed. Moved by Commissioner Weish and seconded by Commissioner Mills. We are now in discussion. Before I move to comments and questions from the commissioners, I wondered, Mr. Kowalski, if you could pull up your presentation again. I had a question about the timeline for clarification. Sorry.
I have their presentation, yep. Give me a second here.
Thank you.
Wait, you said their presentation?
Your presentation,
Mine?
the
Sorry.
very helpful chronological
Yep.
timeline.
Okay. I got it, hold on. Okay.
And I can start to just describe my, one thing that I'm a little bit confused about. Which is that I thought it says in there that that City Council approved a modification that eliminated the requirement. So 2021, they request changes that allow the curb cut servicing 700 Tappan to remain, and this is approved by City Council. So if that's true, then why is it that we also need to, again, approve the
special exception?
the curb cut remaining? This is the difference between the PUD and the SEU.
Wait, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, sorry,
Okay,
no,
well,
you go ahead, you tell me.
Because really, so that's a good question. The original special exception use approval had the condition that that curb cut had to be closed. So it wasn't directly tied to the zoning. So even though the zoning has since been modified to say they can have 4 curb cuts in the district, this counts as one of them, the special exception use still stands that with the condition that that curb cut must be closed. And previously part of a planning commission background as well was that, okay, well, you're only allowed 2 curb cuts in this district. You have 4. one of these has to be closed, you're before us. So again, when the petition, where the supplemental regulations were revised, they're now permitted to have 4, but the special exception use that's approved has the condition that that one must be removed. So while the zoning allows it, the special exception use does not because of the condition.
And would the special exception use always supersede the zoning?
Would it?
Would a special exception use always be, what's the legal term that I'm looking for here? Supersede the PUD,
Well, they
the
were-
zoning?
No, you can't have something in a special exception use that's prohibited by zoning.
But right now, the special exception use has a stricter limit than the PUD, and therefore,
Correct. It is allowed to have a strict, you're right, you're
can be
allowed as a
more
planning commission to
restricted.
attach
Got it.
conditions as long as those conditions are relevant to the standards, which in this case it was, as far as the pedestrian safety aspect. So
Got it.
yes, that condition runs with that special exception use until if and when it would be removed.
got it. Thank you. That's very helpful. And then I just wanted to make sure we all are, like, there's a difference between the curb cut and the area between 700 Tappan and the public sidewalk. So that concern has been addressed, and now we are only discussing the curb cut, which leads to the driveway.
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you. Okay. Other commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Weiss.
So I'm going to pick up right there, Mr. Quilisi. So
Okay.
I think I was here for this last round because the PUD was supposed to close the curb cut. The Planning Commission denied the petitioner's request, and then it went to council, and then council overruled it, I guess,
Well,
in some
yes,
ways.
they have the final say, yep.
But I didn't, so then, did that actually modify the PUD at that time?
Yes.
Okay, so but we can still require, regardless of this petitioner, for a special exception use, that curb cut is closed.
Yes, if you still feel that that's a safety issue, absolutely, you can attach the conditions as long as those conditions are relevant to the special exception use standards, which, again, if
They are.
you say that it's pedestrian impact, yep, absolutely. So
But
yes, you're still allowed
that
to.
would then prevent the petitioner from being able to operate their business. If
Correct,
we-
because I can't sign off on saying that they're in compliance with their SEU.
Okay.
Commissioner Mills?
I was here not just in 2001, but not all the way back.
Wait, you were here, what? No, you were not here in 2001.
Or 2021, that's what I meant. But like, the second bullet on your thing, I was here for that.
18, right? 18.
Yeah, 18,
Yeah.
definitely. So here's the question. I am curious. The permeable pavers are still pavers, and some people park on them, and that box is movable. And this is not about the special exception use. This is about zoning overall, so this is like education for everybody overall. If there is ever parking there, what's the consequence? Like, how is it enforced if someone moves the flower box and decides to park there? How's it enforced, and then what consequences does it have? Like, what's the consequence?
Yep, absolutely. So a couple of things. One, our community standards division, they do enforce parking in the front setback. I'm not as directly involved with the zoning and enforcement anymore as I used to be, but I know for a fact they still, John Barrett, who I talk to regularly, they get community standards as they drive around, and if they spot people parked on the lawns or something, they will cite them. They will give them a ticket for parking in the front open space. I don't know the amount of that, the fine or anything else, but we also have a book, which is still actually an old paper book going back many, many years, of all the parcels literally in the city that predate the parking ordinance that are allowed to have parking in the front setback. So we'll look in that book and say, oh yeah, that they've had parking in that front lawn since 1910. They're allowed. So in this case, this is a pretty visible site. Now, while community standards might not know, like, they might not know directly that parking is prohibited, that they don't know, they're not directly involved with that zoning. So in theory, yes, they could move that planter box and start parking there. However, we've got a couple issues with that. So they could do that until somebody noticed, but one that's not just a special exception use violation anymore, it's a zoning violation. The property owner is going to, so we can zing the property owner as well as the business operator for the zoning violation of parking where parking is prohibited. They could also, it would also, depending on the actions here tonight, if it goes forward and there's a condition placed, that would also again, put their special exception use in jeopardy. Every year, the clerk's office comes to us at least once, maybe twice a year, with an attestation that we have to sign that says this petition is in compliance with the special exception use and the zoning. So that's, again, why they're here tonight, because that's not going to go forward anymore. So with the new owner occupant. So again, yes, you're absolutely right. People can park on pavers, no question. So, and that the box is not permanent. So again, I mean, we'll use our enforcement mechanism when people see it, and it is a little bit stronger of an enforcement arm now, being that it's also prohibited by zoning in there. So, I mean, that's about the best answer I can give you, because yes, it could happen. But there are a couple of different ways that we, again, if there's parking in there, we find out about it. When they come back for their for me to sign off, I'm going to say, look, you guys have moved the box. There's parking in there. I'm not signing that.
So that attestation is once a year? Or?
I think it's once a year. Do you guys know? It's either once or twice a year the clerk's office yeah, like I have to certify the zoning is in compliance and things like that.
And just to share, that's specific because of to it being a marijuana use.
Yes,
that's
correct.
not for every SEU in the
Okay.
city.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. That's
Okay,
thank you.
I was going to say, that's a lot of work.
It's a lot of
Wow.
work.
Yeah, staff time.
No, I
Okay.
I
apologize.
had a feeling there might have been a.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Like the
Only
look on my
because of
face
the-
was like, wow,
And the
okay.
clerk's office is involved because of the coordination with the
Yes.
state of Michigan, and
Okay.
that's why there's stricter
Yep.
regulation of this.
Thank you for
type
that
of use.
clarification. Yeah, that's a very important clarification, only
Okay.
with the marijuana ones.
Got it. So this is actually giving me an idea for a condition, but what I wanted to say is, like, this just happens to have a history.
Yes.
Those couple hundred, however many, square feet have a history of us saying you can't park there and there being cars there, like multiple times. So that's the baggage that comes with that tiny amount of acreage in the city of Ann Arbor. And previously, and this is the thing, I think that most people don't know, like, kind of what it is. We don't have that many TV followers to know what Planning Commission says in terms of us trying to make sure that things are safe for pedestrians. Like, that is highly walkable. And it just so happens that I used to work a block away. And so I would often be like, we just talked about that. Not gonna lie. Like, so I don't work a block away anymore. I don't know how often that would happen, but that the blocking mechanism for enforcement is movable gives me great pause. Great pause, not gonna lie. And so I personally would feel much more comfortable about something that says that if there is parking found to be there, that they lose their special exception use when you attest that. Because that seems to me to be like the real consequence here. And I get it that they're for the, and as the PUD states, the use for the residential it's a highly walkable area. That car is not going to come in and out. But the use of that parking space for retail, particularly retail, that we do have discretion over, it should not be parked on. And I would feel way more comfortable for grass or something that people aren't going to drive on. But that's not what the surface is. And I'm almost positive that in a time when we talked about this 3 years ago, we said, like, can it be a rain garden or something that somebody is not going to park on? And so personally, that's where I feel much more comfortable. In terms of the location for special exception use, yes. It is just, it's not allowed in the zoning,
Commissioner?
but it has history.
Could we ask the petitioner to speak to what their ideas are for enforcing that? This is a new tenant.
Sure, absolutely, yeah.
I'd like
I don't know
to
if you
give them
know
a
of all
chance
the
to talk,
history.
because they're, in a sense, there is baggage, but it's not all their baggage, so. Sir, how would you address these concerns?
I'm not real aware of some of what you're calling is baggage, you know. All I knew was that it was considered to be asphalt, and asphalt wasn't allowed, and it needed to be a non-permeable surface, and that's why the decision was made to put in the pavers, easier for upkeep, landscape, et cetera. But then the planter is the big thing that we put in too, is that 8-foot-long, several-foot-high planter that's filled with dirt, and we now have plants in it. So to say it's movable, I guess, is true, but I think at the same time, you could say pretty much everything would be movable at that point. And we'd be talking about disassembling an entire box, removing all of the dirt, and so, but we have absolutely no plans of using that space for parking. Definitely for the retail, we plan on having that planter remain there. And I guess that's all I can say is the tenant and what our plans are.
And I think that's great. But again, I want to also, maybe this is a point of clarification. The special exception use stays with the land. It doesn't
Yes.
expire. The reason that, actually, that was one of my questions here tonight, is like, why, we already approved a special exception use. So I hope that you are successful there and stay there. But if that's, if for some reason there's a better place to be, and another tenant comes that wishes to use that special exception use, they may move the box. And so that's why having, that would give me more comfort, but I'm not going to stand in the way of this. It's just, goodness, guys, this has come before us a lot.
One more thing, though, is if you look at the site plan, when we turned in the amended site plan, it changed the parking spaces from potentially 5 to 3. And that is on the site plan conceding that as a parking space. It would be just the 3 spots that we lease behind Dominic's. And so what you're referring to on the permeable would have been one of those 5. And the tenants would have been one of those 5. And for what our purposes, we're not asking for anything to use either of those 2 spots. And that is on our site plan, that it moved from 5 spots down to 3 spots on the cover sheet.
Yeah, and I appreciate the update. I appreciate there are plants there, like the box is there, there's signs, I appreciate that. I'm thinking, again, this is something that's discretionary, because it's not just for you, it will move with the land. And so I'm just thinking about trying to make it permanent, thank you. That it's not, it's not just you. So I'm floating that, in part because I heard it.
Yes,
And,
you have support.
oh, okay. But it looks like staff does want to say something, and maybe this is inappropriate, Commissioner Mills, which could be totally legit.
No, that's great, but I wanted to add a little bit too, because I know the question in the back of your minds maybe also, well, okay, we let it go the first time, what's gonna, but again, not that it matters, it wasn't me, but it was issued, but once that certificate of occupancy was issued, we weren't gonna pull the rug out. We couldn't pull the rug out once they're open and establishing. So that is why we were kind of signing off on saying that, it was the city's fault. We issued that CO in error, and they're allowed to continue operating. We weren't gonna pull the rug out. That was a decision from the top. So that is one of the reasons why we were working or allowing the business to continue operating. Once that business kind of stopped, or the previous one went away, and that's when this all kind of brought up again and saying, any moving back into there, this is the issue. So now, again, sign every time in the future, and this is also whether it's myself or any other planner in that position, and you're absolutely right, that runs with the land, that special exception use. But when we get the attestation that we have to sign off on, we're going to go back, any planner is going to look at that special exception use and see if those standards have been met. And again, you're right, we're not out there all the time either, but we'll be out there enough, and I think we will. Yeah, well, I think sooner or later we'll catch it.
I think that a bigger question to you is, again, I think that the petitioner, I don't expect that there's going to be any enforcement problem for this.
Yes.
It's the 15 years down the road, right? When hopefully you join the rest of your colleagues and retire at some point,
Yes,
right?
15 years, yes. I'll be here 15. Yeah, you probably won't be either.
And I just don't, I would imagine, I would hope that it's not part of the normal work plan to go and say, have there been any like parking violations? Like, that's the normal workflow. And so if that gives this additional pause, because for the conditions, again, thinking about traffic, like this is one of the concerns that we have. And it may not be shown as a parking spot, but it could be used as a parking spot without, it's not like taking down a fence. So anyway, that's why, if that just gives the people who are doing the attestation additional, like, hey, maybe we need to check something else out, that's why I would suggest.
And again, the planning commission, we could, if it's found, whoever in the future is, or this applicant, probably not, but anybody in the future is not abiding by that, we can bring it forward to you the conditions are not matched, or they're not meeting the conditions. This is an issue, and bring it before you as a special, at that time, as a planning commission to decide. Otherwise, it would be revoked at that time if they don't adhere to their conditions.
They would be putting their business in jeopardy by parking in that area. I think if they'd like to be in business longer than a year, then definitely, I think that message by the current tenant is loud and clear from discussing the concept that you raised, Commissioner Mills, about can we add a condition that the SEU would be revoked? It doesn't seem like that would be the most appropriate way to address this. It would be best addressed through zoning enforcement and through, at a minimum, there's an annual check for compliance around the time that they would be required to fill this paperwork out by the state. So if we get any complaint, if community standards spots it, it would be addressed through zoning enforcement. We would become aware of it, but also that site is different than what is that particular location is different than what is being requested to be removed as a condition tonight. So are you thinking that you would like to add language to better convince you of the fact that that location is now in compliance?
Potentially, that the history of that particular square footage didn't make it to this petitioner makes me wonder how this gets passed down. So that's among the reasons, and maybe, again, like, I didn't fully wordsmith it and often ask Mr. Leonard, and now maybe you, Ms. Kelly, to help.
I'm talking with him, we're chatting. Yeah. I got it right here in this box.
Can I?
Yeah, and so it's not immediate revoke, but like bring it back to have us reconsider it if there's but I'll stop talking and let somebody else talk.
I know Commissioner Weiss has a question, but first I just want to say it is in the language of our motion that the proposed use is consistent with the PUD, and that in December 2021 it was prohibited, that the regulations were revised to prohibit parking an impervious surface between the structure, blah, blah. So it's literally written into the motion that the supplemental regs prohibit parking in that area. So it seems to me like it's there, and it maybe would be, I don't know that we've ever approved a special exception use that has a threat of revocation based on a violation. So it seems more appropriate that the special exception use would say no parking is permitted in that space, and I think it does, doesn't it? It already says that. And the motion before us is actually about the curb cut. So it almost feels like a whole other thing in a way. So those are just my 2 cents. But I think it is in here, but maybe there's a way to make it more explicit. Okay, Commissioner Weiss.
So 2 things. One, could we remove the impervious surface, the porous surface now as a part of the granting of the SEU? So just remove everything that is there, the block and the pavers, with the provision that there can't be parking, and either the site owner or the tenant can put the rain garden that we talked about in 2021 there, So just a clarifying question about that.
Well, actually, one quick comment about the rain garden. That was actually, our stormwater people ended up nixing that because
sure.
you can't have infiltration, that kind of within 10 feet of the building, but.
Perfect. It won't be a rain garden.
Yeah, like I said, you can make conditions if they relate directly to those standards that you have in your staff report. Now, whether.
It's to remove the
in even
possibility
removing,
of parking.
Quite honestly, though, I think even if there's an intent to park there, even if they remove that, you can park on grass, you can
Okay.
park on gravel.
All right, so for your I'm just asking the question to understand
Yes.
what the boundaries are. So for your purpose, grass, pavers, they're going to serve the same purpose. People are going to park there if they want to park there.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yep.
So then what I heard from Deputy Manager Kelly was, we'll do this by zoning enforcement, but we recognize that the PUD had a requirement to remove the curb cut, but that was never enforced.
Correct.
So where is the confidence? This is a legitimate question.
Yes, no, it is.
Where is the confidence that what we are discussing is actually going to happen
Yes.
if this, not related to this tenant, I really want you to understand this has nothing, as much as it has everything to do with you because you have brought it, this is not about you. This is about, I think, the PUD that has put you in this position. And so we're now trying to figure out what to do about the limitation that we have, or at least that's my point of view. I'll speak for myself. I think you should get what you need, but we also have this other challenge. So if the enforcement hasn't occurred,
Right.
and that was reducing from 4 to 2, and the only reason why the 4 got approved was the second time. It came to the Planning Commission 2 times. Planning Commission had already denied the request to have the 4 curb cuts. Then it came back again, and then it went to City Council. And that last time it went to City Council, because there was a tenant, and it was going to be difficult for that tenant to access their apartment if that specific curb cut was removed, a council member changed, or they voted, it wasn't a single person, so I guess the whole council voted to leave that curb cut in place. So now it's back to us, and if it is back to us and we say, no, the curb cut has to be removed, where does it go then? Does it stop?
Yeah, I mean, the
So
zoning
it
is.
would stop here.
Yes, if
Okay.
the curb cut has to be removed, that's the special exception use. Well, actually, you wouldn't even have to, you would just deny the request tonight, because that's what's in the current special exception use,
Which
is that
is
has
that
to be
curb
removed.
cut.
And then what happened is when the clerk asks me, sign off on it, I won't sign off. So, but again, your question is very valid about the zoning and the enforcement, which is again why I kind of stated previously, there was an initial mistake. And once they went forward with that, after a year, the city made the decision not to do that. But that's, again, I can say that won't happen again, but there's a couple of other, we have a better tracking system, one, now that's in place, but also the PUD previously allowed parking in that area. The PUD did not prohibit parking in that area.
But it didn't have the curb cut. The curb cut
Well, it
wasn't
only
supposed
allowed,
to be
it allowed
there.
a maximum of 2 curb cuts, but
Right.
again, it didn't specify which curb cuts
Where?
had to be
I know.
closed.
Yep.
So, you're right, so the zoning change, in theory, yes, council, if the owner requests a change in the PUD regulations tomorrow, it comes through you, and then maybe they could change it and allow parking there
Right.
again. But, that's not going to happen, but I think
could.
we are between the special exception use with the restriction for no parking and the zoning, now there's 2 catches, but understood that it was passed before. Again, it wasn't enforced before, but I really do, it is different this time because we have more restrictions in place, we have a better tracking system, and it's a major issue.
I want to
Yeah.
just remind again something that Planner Kowalski shared earlier in his presentation and comments, which is that another retail use could open tomorrow. This only would place a condition for the will of the commission to a marijuana retail. Any
Correct.
liquor store,
party
a clothing store, any retail
Correct.
allowed under the PUD, which is pretty much any retail, would open, and it would only have the effect of limiting marijuana retail at this
Right, that's
location.
important, because
And
of the
that is-
special exception.
If we're honest, what would you do if you were the PUD owner? Close the curb cut or get a different type of retailer? So it's just a consideration.
That's- no, thank you.
And so I just wanted to raise that.
Commissioner Weatherby.
So I was here in 2018 when I voted on this, and I think a lot has changed. I think it is now part of the PUD to allow the curb cut that sort of started the whole thing. I also think this is definitely one of those problems with PUDs is 20 years down the road, we're nitpicking bits and pieces that I think we've spent a lot of time, and there's been a lot of money spent on, this curb cut that, there's a lot of other curb cuts in town that are far more dangerous, I think. And I just think that we know that this has, I've been by there fairly often, whether it's to go to Dominic's or to just go on a nice little walk. And, I haven't seen the problems that Commissioner Mills has seen. And, we know it's always a surprise to people. It was a surprise in 2018 that there's an apartment there, and it's a surprise to people, and which indicates to me that that's not an issue. And I just think that I was really happy to see that that staff is, thinks that approval is appropriate, because that was not the situation in 2018. And I think council has approved changes to the PUD. I think we're in a good place now. I can absolutely guarantee people will park on anything, because I do live 2 blocks from the stadium, and grass is absolutely no impediment. And, frankly, there's very little that would be an impediment to people parking if they really wanted to park. So I think this is a good, I think we've all come to a place where we want to support small businesses in this area, and this is a reasonable way of doing it. I don't think this is a huge problem for pedestrians. The neighbors say they want this business. I think we want a business in there. Having an empty building is not good for anybody. And it just seems like we've done a lot of work to get to this point where I think approval is appropriate, and it may not be exactly right, and it may not feel exactly fair because of this and that and the history, but it just seems like we've all kind of come to a point with council and planning staff and the petitioner and the owner that this is actually appropriate now. So that's where I'm standing on it.
Any other comments or questions from commissioners? Going once? I can't tell if you're thinking. Going twice? All right. Okay, then we're going to move to a roll call vote. Oh, nope, not yet. Commissioner Mills.
This is more of a question, and I really appreciate, Commissioner Abrams, you bringing up the number 2. That's not a condition, but instead it's a finding. And I'm curious, just from staff's perspective, in those, however often, kind of attestations, how is this pulled out? Like, how much is it useful to be in the condition that the thing that we're really concerned about, that we want to have some extra scrutiny to, is to just check on that number 2 of our findings are still true, versus making sure that the things that are down in the conditions
Right.
are not?
Again, it's a great question, and I can say that every time I've signed off on that, and even the other planners, when we sign off on those SEUs, we do pull up the approved conditions, the list, literally what did planning commission approve, what conditions were approved, and what does the zoning allow? Again, I know saying that, in this case, it's like, well, we let that go the first time, but we do look at those. We do. I mean, so yes, I think that is relevant because we're signing off on that documentation that says they're in compliance with their special exception use and they're in the compliance with their zoning. So yes, I believe myself or any future planner will look at those conditions before they sign off on that. But
Not just the conditions, but the findings. That's what this is like. That's what I'm curious about, because I appreciate that it's in the findings, and conditions in my mind read a little bit different. And so that's, yeah.
Yes, I guess it's true. But I mean, I think as far as enforcement, everything that's in that motion is covered under different, either through the zoning or through the special exception use. So whether or not, even if we didn't look at that specific motion language, it says in the PUD they can't have parking or impervious surface there. The special exception use, if granted tonight, you could have a condition that there's no parking in that area. That would be like a double check. But that's about the best assurances we can give you for any future tenant or anything else.
Yeah, thanks.
Also, I just want to point out, since we're mincing words, the finding is that parking is prohibited, so that won't change. The finding,
Right.
It's not a condition that it's not used for parking, but I feel pretty confident now that there are at least 7 people who will, on a regular basis, when they walk by that site, look to see if there's any parking there and report it if they see it, so.
It's
Also,
on
the
me.
people in the audience,
And
you're now deputized.
maybe Mr. Kowalski, a soft request to just check the most recent Google Street View image next time you sign off on the attestation.
Yes.
All right. Okay, are we now ready for a roll call vote?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Kelly, will you call the roll call vote?
Sure thing. Vice Chair Abrams,
Yes.
Secretary Weish,
I unfortunately will be voting no, because I believe that the owner should have closed this curb cut and not put you in this situation.
Commissioner Mills,
Yes.
Commissioner Hammerschmidt,
Yes.
Councilmember Dish,
Yes.
Commissioner Clark,
Yes.
Commissioner Weatherby.
Yes.
That carries.
Thank you. Approved.
All right, thank you. We'll now move on to agenda item 11. This is our second and last opportunity for persons to speak for up to 3 minutes about any issue that is not listed as a public hearing on this agenda. Actually, you can speak about any issue. Sorry, I was reading my script. Okay. You can speak about anything you want, but you only have 3 minutes to do it. We'll first call on individuals present to address the commission, then remote participants to speak during the public hearing remotely. Press *9 if listening by phone, or use the raise hand feature if viewing through the web link. For phone access, call 877-853-5247 and enter meeting ID 977-6634-1226. City staff will select callers that have raised their hand using the last 3 digits of your phone number or by name if available for those accessing through the web link. You'll hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. When speaking, please move to a quiet area and mute any television or background sounds so we may hear you clearly. For either method of participation, please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments. Is there anybody present who would like to speak at this time? Seeing no one present, is there anyone that would like to address the commission remotely? Ms. Kelly.
There are no hands raised.
All right, I will close the public comment and move on to agenda item 12, Commissioner Proposed Business. Is there any commission proposed business this evening? All right, we'll start with Councilmember Dish and then Commissioner Mills.
In a belated April 1st proposal, I'd like to propose that we get that PUD back, the zombie PUD that will not die. Just let's have it come back in a month. That's an April Fool's.
Thank you. Commissioner Mills.
Mine is not. I'm just curious if in the future we can get a better understanding of when development agreements are required. Because I had a question about that too.
In the case of 416 Longshore, I think that the original trigger was the parks contribution, is when there's a, is that what you had in mind?
Well, just that they were
petitioner
surprised, and
comment
also I don't remember us approving something that then had a development agreement that went on to council.
So all development agreements go to council.
I guess I don't remember that part of, maybe this is part of the switch about what ends at our table versus what goes on to them. I don't think it's super common where we have the final, I know that it's very common for rezonings. I guess, like, development agreements and rezonings often go hand in
Sure.
hand. But this was one that was just a little bit surprising to me, so.
Sure. So the development agreements, because it's a contract, all contracts are approved by council, so they will always go to city council, but the draft is circulated first and included for this body to recommend, because you are seeing the site plan anyway. I haven't seen a development agreement that was standalone, that only came to planning commission. I can't think of a scenario where that would happen. So generally, you'll see the draft and have the opportunity to recommend it. That could have been split off from your motion if you wanted to make amendments to it or so forth, or it could have been amended within the same motion. The reason why 416 Longshore initially was flagged to have a development agreement was that parks contribution, and then it became, once you have a development agreement, it's an opportunity to accommodate certain things that are specific to that site and development. So because Planner Thatcher did inherit this project from another planner who retired, that was part of the reason that the petitioner was not made aware as early as we would have liked to make them aware. I also am not sure exactly the cadence of the parks contribution discussion, so that could have also contributed. But to the point of understanding what triggers a development agreement and how they come before the commission, I will definitely make a note of that.
Great.
Typically, in the past, it was noted, obviously, parks contributions, but if there's any off-site improvements, that's automatically requires a development agreement. Things like if there's off-site water mains that need to be done, sidewalks, whatever, traffic improvements, those would automatically trigger a development agreement.
This, I just Googled, or I just Control F the UDC to see it's in 5.28.6, and just it's not clear in there where the threshold is. And so I think that this is an opportunity to probably put in writing what our practice is, potentially.
Commissioner Weich. Councilmember Dish.
Just a very quick, that's probably a good idea to make clear what the trigger is. One of the suggestions on the let's get more housing built in a timely manner is that development agreements should have the level of review that the site plan gets. And so in this, if that change were to be made, and if that change is legal, I mean, I am not a lawyer, so I do not know what our land use lawyer will say about that idea, but if that change were to be made, that Planning Commission would have been the last eyes on that development agreement, because the site plan doesn't go to council because it is consistent with the zoning. So I don't know if we're going to see that or not, because I don't know what our land use lawyer is going to think of that idea, but that is an idea that's going to be floated.
A question about the public comment that Mr. Garber made regarding the changes to public hearings. I did watch council last night, and Deputy Administrator Fournier did indicate that he would meet with the planning staff to talk about those changes, but where will we talk about that at a work session meeting, or do we have to wait until it comes as a proposed change?
I think that's a very good question. It's natural that the commission would be curious about how that will, all of the recommendations and items that are identified in the resolutions will be realized. I'm not sure yet. I'm going to have to wait until we have further conversation with our city administrator's office. Of course, also the resolutions, they presented a list, but not a prioritization of that list. There still needs to be staff capacity estimations to figure out, based on a prioritization, based on the lifting and the time involved in these various tasks that have to be estimated, will we need to seek outside support? The resolution spoke to being amenable to the city administrator's office identifying funds for that, which I assume would be, since the horizon was until the end of 2025, probably not identified until like this budget season and what is being presented to council now. So I think there's a lot of to be determined questions, but if you have an expressed preference for how that comes to the commission, it would be great to hear it.
Sure. For me personally, as a single commissioner, I would like to have that conversation in concert with our overall meeting agenda, so that we're not just atomizing that, but that we could look at how the meetings actually flow. So that might mean to go onto our work plan. So in my mind, if we're going to take up that change, can we bring it to our work plan and couple it with a conversation about how the actual meeting runs? Because it's going to change the meeting potentially. And so I'd like to look at it holistically as opposed to just that single piece. That would be my preference. And I think that could be done through a work session where we had a conversation about it, and then that could feed into what recommendation comes. Otherwise, I feel like we're just going to get a recommendation that we will debate. And that it's been my experience that when we get recommendations that we debate and we want additional information, that then delays things. And that's the thing I am sensitive to, is that if we just get it as a recommendation, we won't have a full conversation about it. So
I could imagine this was, I think, one of the more sensitive topics that came up in the resolutions. There were public comments about this. There were also council member questions raised about this. So I think that in particular, when you're talking about changes to perceived transparency, perhaps, in public process, it's something that we definitely want to tread carefully on and would not want to rush through. I don't think anyone on our staff would look to do that. So I will take that to heart, and I will bring it forward to discussions with the Deputy City Administrator.
Any other proposed business comments, questions? All right, we will move to item 13, adjournment, moved by Commissioner Mills, seconded by Commissioner White. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.